I'd like to welcome each and every individual to Voices of Integrity podcast. And today we're with Fritz again, and always enjoy having Fritz on as a guest. He always brings some interesting topics on a wide range of things, and so it could be on young people, it could be on business, it could be on marriage and community, it could be on community, it could be on spiritual. I mean, it could be any topic, and we could, in our podcast, we could go ahead and have two or three or four of those all blended together, which I always find to be most interesting. So, Fritz, you were talking about, if you're participating, it's a lot more fun to participate in the live podcast. And so, if you're able to do that, we'd encourage you to do that. Always come early and always stay late because that's when the best stuff happens. So, in the pre-podcast warm up, Fitz was telling a story, and I said, "Oh, we got to put that on the podcast." So Fritz was sharing how he was meeting with some people. So go ahead, Fritz.
Okay, well, what happens on the first Tuesday of every month? There's about four of us guys that get together just to chit chat among business owners. And we've been doing this for about 2 years. And two of those guys are in the construction world. And the construction world's tough. I mean, schedules are always changing. And um, all those, anybody that's in construction kind of knows that you're in an uncontrolled environment. And the weather can control you. The subcontractor that goes before you in the process can control you, the guys behind you. But the complaint has always been the same. These guys are trying to figure out how to uh, basically how to delegate all their work to their employees and to make their own life a little simpler and to make their own life less stressful and to reduce the amount of phone calls. And one guy was saying between received calls and place calls, he has 100. He takes a look and he said he had lots of days when he has 100 to 110 phone calls a day. And that's on his cell phone, and he's got a crew of 9. And I finally looked at him and I said, okay. I said, I'm kind of tired of hearing you beat this dead horse for the 2 years now. You've been doing the same thing, saying the same things for 2 years. I said, I understand. I've got a different situation. I'm in a controlled environment. I'm in the fabrication industry and we work indoors, so we have a little bit more control over our environment. But I said, you guys keep coming to me and I get the impression you think life ought to be easy. And it said it's not. Owning a business isn't easy. Owning a farm isn't easy. Having teenagers isn't easy. Marriage isn't always easy. I said, why you guys spend so much time focusing on trying to make your job easier, your life easier? I said, just stop. I said, who do you hire? And in the construction world, especially amongst the Amish, it's kind of normal for us to be hiring these 18-year-old kids, 17-year-old kids, 19-year-old kids, entry-level workers, I ought to say. And a lot of people often ask me, say, Fritz, why don't you have more gray hair? Because with the size company that we have, and I said, because I hire people that run the company for me. I just stay out of the way. I hire good people and get out of the way. And we talked about this saying that I love. I need to put a sign in my office. It says, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you haven't hired right. That's a very relevant saying. And
Right?
some of the largest corporations in the world will swear by that.
Right. I've never heard that, but I love it. Um, Man, it'd be fun to have Tom Kuntz and Peter Miles and Elvin on too. Like, if we got together, that would be a lot of fun. It's interesting, Fritz, because like, um, do you recognize kind of how strange I am or not yet?
Well, I know that you don't necessarily just parrot everything that everybody else out there is saying. And I think that's one of the problems that we have in society is people tend to not think. They don't think for themselves. Sometimes they don't give an objective view just because they just want to slide through life. And you don't have to be belligerent or disruptive, or how should I say it, just a thorn in people's side. But sometimes it's good to actually think about, okay, is this really how it is, or am I just parroting what I've heard and been trained to think? What if my am I so trained by my traditions to think in a certain way that I can't even I don't open my mind to a different point of view when it's presented. And as a
So,
business owner, I always go back to business. As business owners, I think we tend to think that way. We try to hire people for as little as we possibly can, and then we complain about the help, and we complain about the customers. I said, well, for your customers, sometimes you just have to lower your expectations. I mean, you're expecting people to be perfect, do exactly what they say, and in reality, that usually doesn't happen. It's a little bit of, they
so
try,
it's
but get
it's
there.
it's interesting because I was 18 years old. So I graduated from high school, and my parents, my dad was a pastor. So my parents told all six of us kids that they expected us to go to 1 year of Bible college. So that was kind of and we had to pay for it. Like they weren't going to pay for it, but that was kind of their expectation of us is, we want you to go to 1 year of Bible college. Like I knew as a businessman, I knew it when I was probably 6, 7 years old. I love business; it's in my DNA. But I was going to honor them, and I'm like, well, it's a good place to probably find a wife too. And
Yeah,
so I went. We did the 1 year, and and I started a convenience. There's guys dorms. Guys had apartments that they stayed in, and the girls had apartments in the other side of the college, and you couldn't go. And so it was a Baptist college. It's a small Baptist college in Ankeny, Iowa, and and I started a convenience store in my dorm. I've got so many. I've got so many stories, so many things I learned about business from that experience. After I finished that up for a year and found my wife there, so I accomplished one of my goals. I then went on to Northern Illinois University and got 3 business degrees, one in finance, one in management, one in marketing. But I'm pretty sure, well, I did. In many ways, I learned more from the Bible college and starting my own business. So I had quite an enterprise. Matter of fact, it got to be so big that my convenience store went ahead and expanded to where I opened up 2, sub convenience stores in the girls' dorms, and had girls, ladies running that, and I did all the work on it. They just were distribution channels. But I don't know, about 4 months into it, like we had, I wasn't there to man it. And so it was on the honor system, but it's a Bible college, for crying out loud. Like people are going there to study, study to be pastors and missionaries. So it's like, of course you can trust them. Not like it's weird. Like after 3 months, I started, so we had credit and I had a whole enterprise, but there was on an honor system. Well, I'm doing inventory like once a month, and they're stealing from me. Like, I'm like, what? And I guess I'm 18 years old,
yep,
right? So I'm whining about it. Like, I'm not happy. And my RA, my resident advisor, he's like, Mark, I'm so tired of you whining about, theft in your business. He said, it's a cost of doing business. If you can't handle it, get out of business and stop whining. And I was like stunned and shocked. And I'm like, you know what? He's right. He's absolutely right. So then I thought, so I think a lot of times we whine about stuff and that takes all the energy from actually thinking about a solution. So after I stopped whining, I'm like, well, what's the solution here? I didn't want to get out of business. That wasn't an option. I said, well, why don't I go ahead and so I wrote a sign. I said, did you come to Bible college to study to be a pastor and a missionary and steal from me? And I put that sign up and it worked. It cleaned
yeah.
up all the theft until somebody ripped down the sign.
Well,
It's
that's
go
what the
ahead.
business world calls solution oriented energy.
Right?
Yeah.
right? It's and so it's weird because I own 9 companies, and one I've owned for 33 years is a business consulting company, a coaching company. And people ask my wife, "What's your husband do?" And she's like, "I'm not sure." When they ask me, I'm like, "Well, I think I'm a mental chiropractor." I mean, what's the difference between a business doing $1 million and 2.5 million or 5 million or 10 million or 25 million? What's the difference? It's how the business owner thinks. So we need to learn to think, differently. Einstein said you can never solve a problem on the level it was created. What does that mean? It means that we create our own problems based on how we think or lack of thought. So you're right. I agree with you totally. like like people, they don't think. They're not thinking. The coffee connection, there's a local one in Shipshe. It's the first Saturday of every month. It's at 10 o'clock. And they're looking at doing 2 separate ones. One at 8 o'clock, most primarily for Amish, and then the other one is English, Amish, whoever, at 10 o'clock. The one that's been at 10 o'clock has been for a couple of years, and that one's been going. And it's interesting because we had a guest. I had invited a guy that owns a legal consulting firm, and I asked him. I said, did you enjoy it? This was 2 months ago, and he said, I really did. And I said, what'd you enjoy most about it? And he said, I enjoyed that, like, everybody in the room's thinking. He says it's not like a lot of these other networking groups and stuff where you kind of go and you give me a fish, I give you a fish, and we walk away. Like, it's really like people are really thinking and really going after it. Another story, Fritz, that it reminds me of is when I was probably, what was I, probably 40, late 30s, and I came home. I call it the warm belly rub principle. So I came home from the office one evening, and my wife was making dinner, and that we had 5 kids at the time, and the youngest one had a dirty diaper. And so my wife, being the good delegator she delegated that to me. She
Sure.
she says, "Hey, Mark, can you do the diaper?" Me, equally being a good delegator, I decided to delegate that to our oldest daughter, who was
Sure.
like 12 years old. So truth is, she was trained in it. She knew how to do it. She had 4 younger siblings. And so truth is, she probably had changed more diapers than I did. So I'm like, "Hey, Ginger Ann, can you change, Angela's diaper?" And because it one of those days, and I was really struggling because like our clients wanted me to coach them. And I remember back in the sales side, when I was in sales right out of college, and I was with a mortgage company as a loan officer, and then I moved into regional manager, marketing manager, and then VP of sales. And it's like trying to get other people, like the business owner, like everybody wants to work with a business owner. And I'm thinking, I have great people that actually are better coaches than I am. And you want to work with them, but everybody wanted me.
Hmm.
And I was just exhausted and I'm just like, and Angela started crying because she wanted mommy or daddy to change her diaper. And I'll never forget, never forget the feeling that I had. I'm like, Mark, you are the worst owner, leader in the world. You can't even delegate a stupid diaper change. And then it hit me, and I said, Mark, maybe you ought to approach this a little differently. Like, maybe your infant daughter and your 12-year-old daughter, maybe your 2 daughters will teach you a lesson that business college didn't teach me. And I know a lot of really smart business people, they didn't know the answer either. And so what I did is I said, Angela, lay down. Your sister's changing your diaper. Just brute force. And I'd done that before, and Angela laid down. But what I hadn't done is I hadn't paid attention. I hadn't watched what was going on. But that time I did. And I don't know if it was our poor training or if it was Ginger Ann maybe not being the best student in the world. But, she laid the poor naked baby down on a cold floor. This is not required to get the job done, but it is required to create a raving fan experience. You got to have the baby on a warm floor. Then you got to tickle the baby. You got to make them giggle. I mean,
Mhm.
if you don't go ahead and know how to do a diaper change, it'll get messy on you. Like it can get really bad. So you learn. And what I realized, I'm like, you got to be kidding. That's what's happening to me in business. Like, I've got 20 years of experience and I'm not teaching the people that I'm leading in how to go ahead and do all the warm belly rubs. I'm teaching them mechanically how to go ahead and service the client, but I'm not teaching them how to do the warm belly rubs. It's the subconscious, the unconscious competence that we as owners often gain, and we don't even know what we know. We just get really good at stuff, which is good for productivity, but terrible when we're training or putting systems in place.
Well, I agree. I can totally relate to that. I think as an owner, one of the recent experiences I had, that warm belly rub might translate into the hiring process. Used to be a time when I hired everybody. And in that hiring process, we usually had a chance to talk about why the guy wanted to quit the job where he was at, why he wanted
Right?
to work for Rock Run, what my ideal uh, environment is, what I'm looking for in an employee, what my vision is, my goal is. All those things kind of came out inadvertently without even really,
Right.
sometimes we intentionally talked about it. And as we grew and then the hiring became more on the manager level and maybe even on the group leader level, we just recently are we're having some real personnel problems because we're not all sharing the same vision.
Right.
And like you said, we hired or they hired with a slightly different intent.
Right.
Things went well, the company did well, the wages were high. People used to come to Rock Run because they wanted to work for a small company, and now they're coming because they want to work for a small company that makes good wages. But that warm, fuzzy belly rub that went with the hiring process has gotten lost a little bit. And I was
Well,
thinking about
that's
that
good.
on our
See,
vacation is like, where did we go wrong? Why are we
right.
having personnel problems all of a sudden?
See, I want to point out to people listening to the podcast. Like, like, this is why I love having guests like Fritz, because like he's looking for a solution. He's like, oh, and he's out there, he's looking for the solution. So he's not whining and complaining. He's not blaming somebody else. He's like, I just want the solution. Like, what's the solution? It was interesting because when I graduated from college, I went into 100% straight commission position, did terrible for 3 months, and then I figured out how to put systems in place to do it, changed everything. Just then 3 months after that, is promoted, or 6 months after that, is promoted to a regional manager, but still doing straight commission. Then 6 months after that, marketing manager, and then a year and a half after that, promoted to vice president of sales with an equity position in the company. So I left that company when I was 27 and started Synergy Solutions, the company I've owned now for over 33 years. And it was interesting because at 26 years old, like I built the system for recruiting, and this thing was a machine. And the president of that company, he was probably in his late 40s, early 50s, and he worked for Caterpillar worldwide. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I mean, a lot of it was just kind of common sense. I'm like, well, let's see, how am I going to do this? And we had two vendors, Northern Trust and Citibank, come in to evaluate us for some of their products, their loan products. And they said to the president, they said, your recruiting, training, and onboarding systems are the best we've seen anywhere in the country, bar none. And I was like 25 years old when I created them. And the president told me, he said, Mark, you are the best recruiter I've seen anywhere in the world. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I think it comes down to a story. I mean, part of the system, part of the system, and what you're referring to is like you got to there's 4 levels of learning. So we have unconscious incompetence, where we're stupid and we don't know it. You don't get born into this world that way. You kind of get there when you're a teenager, or when you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Every 10 years, we get to that point. Then you have conscious incompetence. This is where we're stupid and we know it. So that's a child. Like, they see everybody walking around, running around. They see, and they're like, I want to talk. I want to do everything. So a small child, that's why they learn so much, because they're not arrogant. They're not prideful. Like, they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and they learn. And then the third level is conscious competence. This is where we're good at something and we know it. And then the fourth level is going to be unconscious competence, where we're really good at it and we don't even know it. That's good for personal productivity, but not good for transferring knowledge, warm belly rub systems to other people. And so I remember years ago, I heard a story about an Amish guy, an Amish farmer. And it really made an impression on me. He was out by the road, and his grandson was, right beside him. And some English drove up and said, "Hey, we're thinking about moving into the area." And the Amish guy said, "Okay." And the English couple said, and the English couple said, "Well, I'm just like, is this a friendly area? Like, is this a friendly place to, have a family and everything?" And the Amish grandfather, with his grandson right beside him, said, "Well, that's an interesting question. Like, where you currently are living, is it a friendly, nice place to live?" And they said, "Yeah, it's very friendly. It's very nice." And the Amish grandfather said, "Well, I think you'll find this to be the same way." And a little while later, like an hour or so later, another English, family came up and drove up, and the grandson was right beside the father. And the English couple said, "Hey, we're thinking about moving in this area. Is this a nice place to live?" And the grandfather said, "Well, where are you currently living? Is it a place?" And they're like, "No, the people are mean, and they're this and that and this and that." And the grandfather said, "Well, I think you'll probably find this to be the same type of place." And after the English couple left, the grandson said to the grandfather and said, "Grandpa, you told them totally different things." And the grandfather said, "Well, actually, I didn't, son." And I think your question about finding out why people left previous employment, it's the same thing. And so if we don't find out why people are leaving, what they're currently doing, and what their motivation is, they're going to come, and they're not only not going to be a good employee, but it can be like poison. We call it the moldy strawberry principle. You get one moldy strawberry in a bunch, and all of a sudden it molds everybody else around it, all the other strawberries. So you're absolutely right, Fritz, and on the right track. That is really cool. That is
Well,
really.
we recognize the problem now. Now the problem is to fix it, or now the duty is to fix it and change it. And we're not exactly sure how to fix it, but one of the things I think we're going to try is that I go back to having that conversation with all the new hires and making sure that we're going to be a good fit for each other. So I don't know if that's going to work or not. I don't know if it's logistically possible. We don't hire that many people, but we're all pretty busy. And
Well, what I would recommend, Fritz, that I have seen to be very successful is to go ahead and have whoever, I don't know if you have one person doing the hire. Ideally, you'd have one person, or you have managers doing it. I'm not sure what it would be, whoever that is. And what you do is you have them listen to this podcast and understand the warm belly rub. So Tom Coons, he's the most recent past president of Century 21. It's the largest real estate franchise in the world. He had over 140,000 agents in over 70 different countries. So, man, talk about a lot there. But in he and I kind of argued back and forth, and I said, people will say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I told him, I said, you know who came up with that, Tom, that saying? And he's like, no, who? I said, teachers. I said, my theory is when the teacher's ready, the student will appear. And we argued back and forth. And I think what we've come up with, it's both actually. You've got to have a great teacher, but you got to have a great student too. And you're only as strong as like a link, like a chain link. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So I think it's you learning how to take your unconscious competence, you just naturally do it, bring it back to a conscious competence, and then one level back, and then you teach those who are ever going to do the hiring, you have them sit in with you and then have them watch you probably more than they do the applicant. So they learn your warm belly rubs. And so when you become more conscious of transferring what you subconsciously know to others, and they become more conscious of picking up that, other other people will learn. There's some other things too. I don't know if you've ever used any personality assessments.
Mark, I've struggled with the whole personality assessments. I have a hard time putting people in those brackets because so many times they'll fit two or three, usually it depends on my perception of them at that given moment in time. And I might be in a bad mood or a good mood or irritated or jubilant so I struggle with that. But it's interesting the suggestions you made, because one of our first strategies was that, hey, I still do that interview with the hirers, but then every time my managers want to hire somebody, they got to sit in with that interview again and hear once again what Fritz's vision is for the company and what I think is the most ideal situation for us and for this employee. And so they're going to get, if they hire too many people, they're going to really get tired of hearing the same old story. But what's wrong with that? They're a manager. I want to drill it into them. So I
Right.
haven't done the best job of passing that culture on down into my management. And I
Well,
think,
the trick is they won't have to go ahead and listen to you tell the story, go through everything, if or when they learn how to do it themselves and you don't have to be in it.
well, I always try to apply. I have this index card, this recipe card in my desk drawer that I wrote out Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, 4, and 5, I believe. I think it's the best management training that there is, but I think I've failed in not keeping that in front of my managers. And it starts in as, I think, what chapter 3, you might have to correct me on this. I think it starts in as like, do nothing out of strife or vain glory. And if your managers can remember to do nothing, and that means nothing, out of strife or out of vain glory, it's easy for a manager to get into that
Right.
vain thing where, hey, I'm the manager, I'm the boss here, you're going to do as I say. But in
Right.
lowliness of mind, how does that go on? Help me here. In
Yeah,
lowliness of
no,
mind,
I
each
know what you're
esteem the other
referencing.
better
Um,
than yourselves.
right. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to go into, a second podcast. And so if you think this one was good, we're going to go ahead and we'll look into that verse more. But I'm going to do in the next one, I'm going to actually do a 17-second personality assessment that I learned how to do through Life Masteries Institute. They're a nonprofit 501c3 organization. They're phenomenal. And I do a lot of volunteer work with them, and they help businesses and community based organizations to come together to bring a lot of value to the community in all different ways. So we'll be doing that in the next podcast here. So stick around for that. If you have any questions on anything that we covered today, feel free to connect with the individual who invited you to participate in today's session, or you can call toll free 888-230-2300, outside the US 630-393-9909. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. God bless and have an amazing day. Bye bye.